Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Tanei Ricks. Tanei Ricks is a postdoc researcher at the University of Memphis, and you can find out more about Tanei Ricks and his wonderful work at TaneiTheScienceGuide.com. And his name is spelled Tanei, Tanei, thescienceguy.com. Welcome, Tanei Ricks.
Hey, Catherine, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Now, right now in the United States and all over the world, people are protesting the death of George Floyd under the knee of a Minneapolis police officer. It is an absolutely heartbreaking time to be alive. And in this interview, Tanei Ricks and I are going to talk about how racism affects a person's health. So first of all, Tanei, do you have any thoughts for our audience about how you personally have been affected by the death of George Floyd?
Oh man, it's been pretty wild. I now knowing how social media and like the media in general works and with I guess bringing awareness to police brutality and things like that. I really try to stay away from a lot of social media narratives and the things that are coming out because I think a lot of people are unaware of the power of those kind of traumatic events and how they embed themselves into your mind frame and how they affect your daily life. And so I try to be really aware of what I allow into my sphere as far as like what I'm taking in every day. And this is something that I have tried to minimize because this is something that has been prevalent for me, especially because I grew up growing up in the South. Racism is a normal thing, especially with myself and people in my family, especially my grandparents. We've all experienced it in some way. A lot of it has been experienced with my grandparents, but this situation is almost a repeat of 6 years ago when Eric Garner was murdered by the NYC PD for selling loose cigarettes. So the situation is almost exactly the same 6 years ago, and the outrage is amplified this time because of other things that are going on in the world with the COVID-19 pandemic. So this one's been a little bit different from how I've handled it in the past because I have been a part of protests in the past. I have been a part of sending money for bail, supplies, things like that. The other movements that have been out of town, especially for Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, things like that. All those things happened to me all those things happened when I was in grad school. I'd probably say like my second, third year of me doing my PhD was when a lot of these prominent police brutality cases and wrongful deaths and murders of Black men and Black women started really getting a lot of publicity, and it's changed a lot with social media. And I know I was looking at the timeline last night, and it's easy to get sucked up into it because you start feeling just the raw emotion of like, oh man, here we go again. It's like, and me and some of my friends talk about it, and we know that even though it's not right what happened with the cops, we also know that part of it is a distraction because we always know that right around summertime is when we start seeing more police brutality cases. But the thing is that the cops kill people every day. Like, and it's interesting how we're programmed to only look at certain ones. They're all horrific. They're all horrendous. But we do have to also be cognizant of what we're taking in and why certain things are allowed to propagate through the media. Even last night, I was looking on the timeline, and we've become so desensitized to death, and especially Black death, that it's fine to just put it on the timeline. People were putting pictures and video, like live video of dead bodies on the timeline last night. I'm like, y'all are like, please relax. Like, y'all are ridiculous. Like, what would possess you to think that that is okay? Like, could you imagine being, it was a retired police chief or police officer up in Minneapolis. And I'm like, man, could you imagine being his wife or one of his children or one of his close family members, and you're just strolling on Twitter and you just see his dead body pop across your timeline? It's like people have no regard for Black life in that aspect, and it's all, you know, clout chasing. Everybody's trying to get likes and retweets off of this, and it's just like, man, this is a flesh and blood human being that was unjustly murdered by the cops for the umpteenth time, and the only thing that you can think about is getting social media clout. And it's sickening. It's so sickening, and it's just it's heavy. And you know, there's for me personally, the marching and protesting, you know, I have zero problems with that. I have zero problems with, you know, what people are doing right now, because you have a lot of people right now that are hurting, they're frustrated, the economy is terrible. People have been stuck in the house because of the quarantine, and it just seemed like the perfect storm of events, where you have all of this economic strife and turmoil and social turmoil with this virus pandemic, and then you have yet another Black man getting murdered by the cops, and it just, all 50 states are rioting. That's unheard of. that's something that I've never seen in my lifetime. And I think that's something that I don't think a lot of other people have seen either. And it just shows, you know, it's not just George Floyd. It's the years and years and years of publicized police brutality cases where we see people murder other Black people and get to walk free from it and be protected by the justice system. And that's something that we have to look at, we have to learn from. And it's also interesting too, because I see a lot of arguments online. It's like, oh, white people get murdered by the cops all the time, and we don't go outside and march and pray or march and protest. And my thing is, okay, well, maybe you should go harder for your people. Like, if you know the cops are out here doing dirt and you're not standing up for them, or you're not saying anything about it, then what's going to stop that from you being next? But the problem with that is that when you gotta obtain and uphold or maintain and uphold a power structure, you have to take casualties along the way. And that's what these white people that are getting murdered by the cops are. Because people say that everybody is presumed innocent until proven guilty, but the cops act as judge, jury, and executioner in the streets. It can't be that way if that's really what the U.S. justice system is supposed to be. But when you understand like what the cops are really there to do, cops don't protect people, cops protect property. That's why you see in certain parts of town, when you have the rioting and the protesting and people are, you know, starting to burn down buildings, the cops are in certain areas. They'll let you tear up your stuff. They'll let you burn down your stuff. They won't let you go on the other side of town and loot the nice neighborhoods and burn down the nice neighborhoods. They over there, they protect that stuff. But now it's gotten to a point where there's so many people that they can't even stop it. Like, they can't even, this has been what, the 8th night in a row that Manhattan's been looted, and they're hitting all the high-end stores. And I'm just like, you know, this is what happens when you know that you have corruption all throughout the police force as a whole and the police as an institution, and you constantly see people being let go after murdering somebody with clear-cut evidence. It's not like, you know, these things are iffy, where it's like, ah, man, you know, he might have did this, or, oh, you know, I could kind of see the cops' point of view. It's like, no, why are you shooting at somebody that is unarmed? And I saw the most asinine comment. I think it was from President Trump. Either it was from President Trump or Joe Biden. I cannot remember who it was. But they're talking about safety training so that cops would learn to shoot unarmed people in the leg instead of the heart. And I'm like, what are you doing shooting at unarmed people to begin with? Like it did, like that just shows the psychopathy of how we think about law enforcement and how politicians think about law enforcement. And it shows the true nature of law enforcement, where they're not there to protect people, they're there to protect property. And if anything is infringed upon that, then you're gonna get shot at.
Now, we're here at the Natural Healing Show today to talk about how racism affects health. And here at the Natural Healing Show, we think about your physical health, your emotional health, your spiritual health. And so tonight, Ricks, will you share for our audience, your perspective? What exactly is racism?
So racism has a lot of different definitions. I think the most accepted definition is racism being a practice of discriminating against another person based on their race. A lot of this can be seen, a lot of people talk about, the difference between prejudice and racism, and, saying that anybody can be prejudiced against anybody else, but only people with power can be racist against other people. And, when people say that, they talk about things like getting a job, getting, a house or an apartment, like getting approved for like loans and things like that. Just financial things that certain institutions are more lenient on for other people that look like them versus people that don't look like them. You have history of things like redlining, and redlining was a racist practice where basically, you would draw lines through districts to keep certain people out. You would have only this part. You would basically draw lines across the city where things would be developed, and they would keep certain people out only so other people could come in. It's almost like gentrification. And but it's basically having the power to discriminate against somebody else and threaten their livelihood based on the color of their skin or what their race and nationality is.
All right. Now, how does racism affect a person's self-esteem? So when you think about self-esteem, that's your emotional well-being and also how you think about yourself. So how does racism affect a person's self-esteem?
I think for the average person, it's going to obviously make you feel less than about yourself, because for someone to have the power to be racist against you and it actually affect you in a tangible way, they have to be disturbing your livelihood in some way. And when you look at how difficult it is, especially for Black men, to feel like they're, I guess, the head of the household, because Black men have one of the lowest median incomes in the United States. So you have a heavy burden of trying to be the sole provider or trying to be provider for your household. And then, you work at a job or you work in some field where you're discriminated against. It's going to make you feel like you're not good enough. And I know I grew up with, my parents telling me, you got to work twice as hard to get half as far. And while in some areas it is true, it's a heavy burden for, a 6-7-year-old to carry, that you're being told that it doesn't matter, how good you are in school or, how well you perform in certain areas. There's just, you just have this glass ceiling that you're always going to bump into because of the people that are in power. And for some people it makes you feel hopeless. Like I remember, being in grad school and seeing the deaths of, Trayvon Martin, Mike Brown, John Crawford. There's so many. It's a shame that like I can't even remember all of them because there's so many. there's so many that weren't on the news. But I remember seeing those things and just feeling, kind of hopeless, because it's like, okay, well, how am I supposed to go to work and do these things that I need to do to take care of myself and take care of my family? And I'm worried about having an altercation with the cops before I come to work. So, and it makes you paranoid. It makes you feel like racism and the world is just falling down around every corner. And that's what I said earlier. It really gets into your mind, and it starts to go into everything that you do. Like you have to take certain considerations for things. And people talk about white privilege, and even the fact that people talk about white privilege means that others already have a leg up on you and they already have an advantage over you that you didn't have. And so when you get in those situations, it's hard for you to be able to dig yourself out of it. Also, you get in certain spaces, there are no other black people there. And, you know, you become kind of the token or the anomaly. And it's like, it's hard to navigate that because you don't see anybody else there that looks like you. It's easy to relate to people when, or if you're having a difficult time or if you need help, it's easier to ask somebody that looks like you for that help because they empathize with you, because they see something familiar in you. They see their uncle, they see their cousin, they see their brother, they see their son, and vice versa. You see your mom, you see your aunt, you see your sister. So it's easier for you to relate to a person that way. And so when you don't have that, you're missing that support system, you're missing that support structure. And the further you go, the better support system you need. And so when that's lacking, you make a mistake and it's lights out for most people. And so that's why a lot of people that get in certain spaces, they only get one opportunity because they don't have a support system that's actually backing them. Whereas the people that are in power, they do have that support system and they've set it up for themselves to be that way. So the self-esteem aspect, you know, is something that's not talked about a lot because it does tie into your health, especially with rates of disease, which I'm pretty sure we'll talk about later. But there's a lot of health. Everybody knows that a lot of your health starts in your mind, and if you feel like you're taken care of, you're supported, then that's going to show in your actions. It's going to show how you carry yourself. And if you feel threatened all the time, that's also going to show in your actions. It's going to show in just your general well-being and how you communicate with people. So racism, I've heard it described as a disease of the spirit, because people that are racist, they can't see the God in everybody, and it's a survival thing. And because there's years of this trauma and frustration built up, then it's basically just people lashing out for not having the same opportunity. So it's a very deep thing, and it's something that's not really talked about a lot, especially when it comes to matters of the mind and how it affects the victims of racism and the people that propagate it as well.
Now, Tanei Ricks, postdoc researcher at the University of Memphis, you've come very far in your own career. How does racism affect a person's overall mental health?
That's the real big one, and that's why I actually limit a lot of my time on social media now, because like I was saying earlier, it really does get into your head, and if you're not careful, you will see racism basically everywhere, and you'll create situations for yourself that are actually not what you think they are, and you'll further alienate yourself away from a structure that you would need, that's actually that you need for support. And for myself, I know that constantly seeing images of people that look like you being murdered, people that look like you having these altercations with the police, people that look like you being discriminated against for certain jobs, it really takes you to a dark place. And it's very easy to get depressed and think that the whole world is against you, and it's very difficult to really push yourself through in those times, especially when you do, like I was talking about earlier, you don't have the support system that you need in order to be able to push through. And it ties into the self-esteem as well. And when you start being programmed with certain images, then you start to carry out certain behaviors. That's why I say it's not a mistake that you have all these things going on in the media. The media is programming. They call it television programming for a reason. They're trying to get you to think a certain way. And so if all you constantly see is these images of Black people getting murdered unjustly by the cops, then it's going to instill a fear in you of police confrontation, and it's also going to instill a fear in you that you could just die at any time and nobody's going to care, and the person that does it is going to get away with it. And that's a very difficult burden to carry as well, because I mean, it's something that you think about during the day. It's something that you think about like while you're working, and you have to be careful about that. You have to be careful of taking in these images and not getting too desensitized to it, because social media is a gift and a curse. Where social media, especially Twitter, has reported more accurate news than the actual news has. But the problem is it's unfiltered. So you see everything super raw, just like I was saying earlier with the police chief that people were posting on the timeline. Is people have gotten so used to putting themselves in that situation and seeing that kind of death and normalizing it. That's the dangerous part, is that a lot of this is normalized, and when it becomes normal for the police to do what they do to citizens, and you have a problem, because everybody knows about Second Amendment rights and our right to have standing militias to defend ourselves against governmental tyranny. Well, this is a perfect example of government tyranny. And it's interesting how you see, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, you got a lot of these armed patriots storming one of the Capitol buildings. I can't remember what state it was in, but they're storming the Capitol buildings to protect their rights. But then you see innocent Black people getting murdered in the streets, and you don't see the same thing. That highlights the racism that people are talking about. That highlights the fact that it's not about defending gun rights or anything like that, because you haven't heard the NRA say anything about a lot of these deaths that have happened at the hands of the police, and or encouraging Black people to be armed so that they can defend themselves against the police and defend themselves against police brutality, or defend themselves against any threats that are in their immediate space. You never see that. You never see these institutions that are supposed to be neutral actually defending both sides. They only defend one. So when you're cognizant of that, when you're cognizant that all of the systems that are in place for other people are not helping you or are not giving you the same opportunity, it's like, okay, well, where do I go? Where do I turn to? And a lot of people haven't been taught these things as they grow up. So it's just another thing that you have to learn on the fly. And it's like an elevator. People tell you that, or you see the little placards inside of the elevator where it says maximum occupancy or maximum load X amount of pounds. Well, if you start putting all those things on your mind and you never have a way to effectively deal with those problems, that load just goes up and up and up and up and up. And sooner or later, that elevator stops working. Well, it's the same thing with certain Black people. Certain people, they get overburdened with this to a point where, they become paranoid about everything, or it's difficult for them to do their job. They start to get ostracized at their job. It's difficult for them to relate to friends and family members. And it's just, again, it just becomes a systemic disease that just completely debilitates a person.
Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, research shows that people of color across the globe, both in the US and the UK, and again, all over the world, are disproportionately affected by the coronavirus, both in terms of numbers of people getting sick and also dying. Experts argue that there are many reasons for this, including higher incidence of diabetes and heart disease. Tanei Ricks, how does racism affect a person's immune system?
Well, obviously, if you're in pressured or a fight or flight state all the time, that does weaken your immune system. And being in a fight or flight state for a prolonged period of time has been shown in numerous studies to weaken your immune system. When your fear is immunosuppressant. And that's another thing about the pandemic itself that's interesting, is that a lot of the things were geared towards fear and, oh, everybody's got to stay inside. You got to stay inside and do this, or you got to stay inside or you're going to die. And the fear is going to take people out faster than any disease will, because it's going to open you up to be, colonized by these bacteria or these viruses, and then they replicate, and your immune system is not doing what it's supposed to do because it's suppressed. And racism in a lot of ways is the same thing. Like I said, all these diseases, they start in your mind first. You have to have the belief that you can be infected by these things to begin with. And when you're infected by one thing, it just makes it easier for something else to come in and do its thing too. I mean, the same thing with racism. It starts in your mind, it weakens your mind, it puts you under stress. Stress has chronic stress states have been shown to be immunosuppressive. So all of these things on a daily basis, you're constantly feeding yourself with that fear, and you're constantly immersed in a situation where you're in constant fight or flight. It's going to have an enormous effect on your health, especially your immune system. And a lot of these people are getting sick just simply behind being in a racist workplace. And that's crazy, because everybody, if you're qualified to do a job, or if you're qualified to do anything, you should feel safe in your workplace. And just by the virtue of being born, you have certain I can't say it. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. You have these God-given rights.
Inalienable rights, yes.
Yes, you have these God-given rights that are granted you just by being a human being. And when those rights are infringed upon, you have every right to defend yourself from that. And when you don't defend yourself from that, then it just continues to infect you, and the sickness gets worse. I mean, racism is a sickness, and it has all of the signs of what people would call disease. So for all intents and purposes, it is a disease. It is a sickness that runs deep through the fabric of America. I mean, America was founded on these principles, and the America that we know was founded on these principles. So is you can't separate these mental problems from the physical problems, because anything that starts in the mental, it will eventually manifest in the physical, because the mind is the link to the spirit. And all diseases, as I'm sure you know, they start off as a disease of the spirit, which eventually goes to the mind. And when it goes to the mind, then it shows up as a physical manifestation. So people, not only the victims of racism, end up being sick, the propagators of racism also end up being sick. You've never seen people that operate in a healthy way also be racist. So it's not just the people that are affected by racism that are sick, it's the people that are carrying it out as well. So it's two sides of the same coin. But for the people that are disproportionately affected, it definitely affects them more, because the people that are being racist, they get some kind of benefit or kickback from it that kind of offsets that sickness. But the people that are victims of it, they also feel the full weight of it, but they don't get the kickbacks to offset it. So they're in a worse state than the people than racists would be, because you're not experiencing the benefits of the system that's supposed to be upheld for certain people. So you're getting it double, basically. You're getting shot in the streets, you know, your family members being raped, killed, things like that, and there's no recourse for you. There's no way for you to defend yourself. There's no way for you to seek any kind of retribution, because a lot of these people there are protected by the law. They're protected by the government. And you know, just putting it plainly, a lot of people are scared of that. A lot of people are scared of the fact that, you know, oh, well, this cop could do this, and you know, they're not going to go to jail, but if I do it, I'm going straight to jail. Well, there are a lot of people that are out there that don't care. They're just like, look, this is what it is. If I go to jail, I go to jail. And that's to me, that's what's standing up for what's right, no matter the consequence. Because, you know, wars have casualties, and at the end of the day, if you're not willing to accept the fact that you could be a casualty, or that there are casualties, and you're not ready to fight. And racism as a whole has made a lot of people scared, especially with when people say we live in like a post-racial society, especially because, you know, Civil Rights Act and things like that. A lot of people were lulled to sleep, and with the advent of the smartphone, a lot of people are now getting to see that racism never left, you know, just because, you know, a lot of people got together, had some marches, did some protests, and we have these acts in the United States. Well, laws and acts are only as powerful as the people that uphold them. So if the citizens can't make the government responsible for the laws that are on the books, then they can't protect the citizens. And that's effectively the buffer between the government and the people is the cops. And if people can't enforce the Civil Rights Act, or they can't enforce these different things, then there's no use of them even being on the books. They might as well not exist. And so
Right.
when you know all these things, is difficult to navigate through that.
All right. Now, there's a lot of scientific research about the health effects of racism. In Georgia, and I live in Atlanta, in the state of Georgia, researchers studied African American teenagers over a period of 4 years. By the age of 20, the teenagers who reported consistently high levels of discrimination, racial discrimination, also had higher levels of stress hormones, higher blood pressure, and these are teenagers, more inflammation, and higher levels of obesity. And in another study of pregnant Black women who reported high levels of discrimination, they were more likely to give birth to babies who weighed less than 5 pounds 8 ounces, putting them at risk of a range of serious health complications. Now, Tanei Ricks, many white people have faced criticism recently on social media for proclaiming things like, "I'm not a racist." How do you think that people of all colors can work together to stamp out racism?
Racism, I think that for people to, for racism to truly be gone, I think a lot of people have to look within, and you have to understand that there's enough for everybody. Now, I'm gonna introduce somebody that a lot of people don't know. Her name is Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She wrote a book called The ISIS Papers. And in the book, she talks about how white people are the genetic descendants of Blacks from Africa. And during that time, it was like a genetic mutation, essentially, where these people lost their melanin and the pigment that makes your skin dark, and they were essentially outcasts from African society. And through biological climatology and through many years of being isolated from African civilization, and then having to be, and basically being forced to live through an ice age by themselves, these people developed a very icy cold demeanor and a very vengeful spirit, essentially. And we're seeing a lot of that now in racism, especially in America, as lashing out because of these things that happened thousands and thousands of years ago that people are unaware of. I think a lot of people that are racist are unaware of why they are racist. And as she describes it, it comes from that fundamental rejection from mainstream society. And it was never solved. And psychologically, people have not had to deal with that rejection. And so because you're forced to deal with harsh conditions where, you know, obviously everything is snow, and if you go outside, the sun is reflecting so brightly off of the ice, people were getting sunburned. So you have this biological disadvantage to the things that are around you, and then you have this psychological injury and being an outcast from society. You're forced to scrounge for things on your own in a very harsh climate. That's gonna piss somebody off. And when you have a lot of people that have experienced that, and that trauma is never dissipated, it just goes from bloodline to bloodline to bloodline. And that's what we're seeing now, is that we're seeing the effects of thousands and thousands of years of neglect of a certain class of people. And now these people are acting out. And now it's like, okay, we're going to be racist because, not because we hate everybody else on the planet, but because we have this deeply embedded trauma in the planet that, A, there are not enough resources and that nobody wants us. So if that's the case, we're going to build everything for ourselves, and we're going to protect it in such a way that nobody can have it. And if you really look at how racism plays out, it's spot on, because a lot of people, especially white people, if they were to go, let's say a white person were to go to therapy for being racist, a lot of these things, a lot of people just say, hey, well, I just learned this from my parents. Okay, well, who did they learn it from? They learned it from their parents. Okay, well, where did they learn it from? Nobody will ever be able to give you a concrete answer as to why they are racist, because it's a psychological problem that has come from thousands and thousands of years of neglect and abuse that's being played out now. And in a lot of ways, it's not on Black people to tell white people to stop being racist. It's on white people to examine why these things are happening and really get to the root cause of it, and get to the root spiritual cause of it and the root psychological cause of it, because without that, there's never going to be peace on this planet. If you notice, everywhere that, especially America, everywhere where there's white people that come into contact with other indigenous tribes or other Black people that are in the area, death, disease, and famine always follow. And that's not even me saying, that's not even me trying to be rude or me trying to be mean. That's in history books. Like you look at things like Trail of Tears, smallpox, with Haiti. You look at the earthquakes down in Haiti. You look at the world wars. Like everywhere where white people come into contact with other people that don't look like them, there's always conflict. There's always conflict. It's unavoidable at this point. And again, that comes from this deep psychological trauma of not having enough resources and not being able to survive. And if white people were to really examine that and understand that Earth as a realm is abundant and there are resources there for everybody and everybody is able to enjoy these resources and be fine, then I think a lot of the things that we see today would not be happening. Unfortunately, I don't ever see that happening, because it's difficult for somebody to take that look at themselves and say, oh, wow, I'm really messing up. Like, I need to change. Like, there's something fundamentally inside of me that I need to change. Everybody wants, you want everybody else around you to change before you have to change. And so because you already have this system that's benefiting you, what's the point of stopping it? So to me, the cure for racism, especially for people banding together, is to look inside themselves. But to take that to the next step, if you want to support Black people specifically, put money into the institutions that support them, put money into the institutions that protect them. All the lip service and, saying, oh, Black Lives Matter, all that stuff is cool. But at the end of the day, if you're not putting resources towards people for them to grow and get better and for them to progress in society, then they're going to stay second-class citizens. That's just the way it is. And
now,
that's just the way it's been
one
engineered.
way that we can begin, whoever we are and whatever we look like, we can begin to examine our own attitudes is with the practice of empathy. And empathy is a practice of making an effort to understand what other people go through. Now, there is a professor at Harvard, Dr. David R. Williams. He's a professor of African and African American Studies and Sociology. And he put together a very interesting everyday discrimination scale. And there are 9 points on this, okay? And again, this is something to think about. So he asks, and this is just something to think about. So the first question is, you are treated with less courtesy than other people are. And then you think about that. You're treated with less respect than other people are. You receive poor service than other people at restaurants or in public situations. People act as if they think you're not smart. People act as if they're afraid of you. People act as if they think you're dishonest. People act as if they're better than you are. You are called names or insulted. You are threatened or harassed. And, most recently we could ask, or you're shot at or killed. And then this everyday discrimination scale, a person would, notice, does this happen every day? At least once a week, a few times a month, a few times a year, less than once a year, or never. So again, one way for all of us is to begin to think about what other people go through, such as what you're describing. So Tanei Ricks, any thought on David Williams' everyday discrimination scale?
Oh man, that's a lot of those questions on there are pretty accurate, especially the smart one. It's funny because I'll say certain things online, I'll say certain things on Twitter, and people instantly discredit me because I'm black, and I'm just like, bro, I have a PhD in organic chemistry. Like they don't just give those out. Like this is something that I worked really hard for. And it's funny because I have friends that joke with me, like I'll put something on the timeline and it won't get a lot of engagement, but somebody else white will say it and then it'll just blow up. And it's so funny because everybody's like, oh man, whenever you put some information on the timeline, it has to be verified by like 10 different sources. People tell you that you're wrong and all this stuff. And I'm just like, I'm used to it. It's cool. Like I don't even worry about it because I know I'm right. I know what I'm saying is right. And so, it doesn't affect me on that level. But I can say that that is something that does happen every day. Sometimes you walk into a restaurant. I've walked in the restaurants I've never been into before, and people will instantly, like I won't get service. Or there's actually a place that's right around the corner from my house that I used to walk to and go to. And I remember the first time I went in there, like the bar is not full. Like it's not full at all. There's two bartenders there. People are in there doing their thing. They're up there talking, doing whatever. I sit at the bar for like 15 minutes before anybody even comes over to me. And I'm like, dude, are you serious? Like, I know that y'all saw me walk in here because I'm the blackest thing in here. I know y'all saw me walk to the bar. I know y'all saw me sitting down looking at the thing. I even put my phone down to kind of signal like, hey, I need some service over here. And it takes you 15 minutes to come over. You don't even say, hey, you don't acknowledge me, any of this stuff. And it's just like, how am I supposed to tip you as a service worker and you're not doing your job? And then it wraps around to, oh, black people don't tip well. And it's like you have all of these self-affirming stereotypes. And it's just like, no, just treat people as they come in and as you interact with them, and you won't have any problems because I don't have any issues with just going somewhere, just sitting down, just chilling, talking, whatever. But when I go in a place, I expect a certain amount of service. I expect the same service that everybody else gets. But as when you live in predominantly white areas and people don't know you, is you do see a difference. That's what I was saying earlier about the empathy, and you can see when somebody looks like you instantly empathize with them because you see yourself and you see your family in them. So it's easier for you to relate to them. But when you go to these different places, these different spaces, you're an outsider. Like you're not, you don't look like everybody else there. So they can't really empathize with you like that. So of course you're going to get a little bit different treatment, but racist treatment is a lot different from, hey, we've never seen you here before. It's like, oh, we've seen your kind here before and we don't want you in here. So it's a little bit different, and you have to be aware of that. But no, his scale, I would say that everybody that's black that's been in a space like that has experienced those questions a non-zero number of times, and probably a high non-zero number of times.
Okay, now final question, Tanei Ricks. How can a person of color who has faced racism his or her entire life build healthy self-esteem in today's society?
Oh man, you gotta know your history. That's the thing that helped me the most, is knowing my history. And as people of color, and you can't conflate the two terms, like people of color and black, because people of color, there's a lot of people of color that are not black allies, and that there are a lot of people of color that use black struggle as kind of like a platform to get their own stuff moving. And then once that gets moving, then black people left behind in the dirt. That's happened so many times. And so when people talk about the people of color versus black argument, I make clear, like, no, I'm black. This is a black issue. This is not a people of color issue, because when you start to include everybody, that's how certain groups get marginalized. It's the same thing with affirmative action. Affirmative action, people say that it's supposed to be for black people, but the people that benefit most from it are white women, because affirmative action is something for minorities. Minorities is not exclusive to black people. Minorities also includes people with disabilities. It also includes white women. So the people that disproportionately get more support for affirmative action hires are white women. And a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think it's, oh, you see a black person in place, it's like, oh, this is affirmative action hire. It's like, no, your secretary is too. And I guarantee you the majority of the women that work here are affirmative action hires as well. So I want to make that clear as far as the POC versus black. Those are two different things. Those are two different arguments. And a lot of people actually waking up to that argument that they use these terms to further marginalize black people and make it seem like they're getting the set asides and benefits that they're supposed to be getting, but they're actually not. But for you to combat racism, you got to know your history. And you got to know that you are not less than. Your ancestors have done great things on this planet. That potential is inside of you as well. You have the ability to create anything on this planet that you want to. And you can do this through the odds. And there are a lot of people that have succeeded in spite of racism. There are a lot of people that have succeeded in spite of prejudice. You know, you have people like Reginald Lewis, you know, first black billionaire. You have people that and it wasn't an uncommon story. He just did the same thing white people were doing. Like he used all of the tricks, the loopholes, and he also put his own hard work into that and became one of the wealthiest men in Black America. You talk about Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. A lot of people don't know that wasn't the only Black Wall Street. There were several Black Wall Streets that were across the US. So Black people, when left to their own devices, have the power to do what they want to and really affect change on this planet. And it's so interesting how there's a concerted effort to always mess with the Black community. It's like, okay, if y'all hate Black people so much, why don't you just leave them alone? Like, why don't you, just let them do what they want to do? And, if it's true that Black people are just inherently violent, inherently thugs, then it'll come out. But the problem is it doesn't, because even in the most impoverished areas, you always find somebody that is doing something that's ahead of the curve. That's why you always have these diversity initiatives. It's not because people are just trying to fill a quota. It's because they know that by having diverse perspectives and by having a diverse workforce and by having Black people in your workforce, the quality of your work is going to instantly improve because you have an outside person that is outside of your scope.
The Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, and we have been blessed with the inimitable Tanei Ricks. This is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. Please visit Tanei Ricks at TaneiTheScienceGuy.com, and that's TANEI, thescienceguy.com. And remember that when you do what you can do to combat racism, you are promoting natural healing for the entire society. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.